Hey, how's it going? I'm just kind of bored. I kind of thought the light was pretty good right here, and I don't know. I just thought let's look at some books. So I just unpacked this big box of books the other day. Look, it's a Sleazak, and I didn't have. Well, there's a couple shelving areas I could put them on, but I just felt like stacking them up right here up against the wall. You're just going to get a stack of books on top of some crates. And then they're all hardback. We're not. There's some softback in here too. So we're going to start over here on the left, and we're just going to go through and look at the books, and you're going to get to see what the books are. They're in my collection. This is Island at the Top of the World. What I'll be doing is I'll tell you whether I've read the book or not, and what I remember about reading the book, and I'll also tell you where the book came from, and maybe a little bit about it if I know anything about it. Look, this Walt Disney Studios new movie by Ian Cameron. So this came from my mother in about 1974, 1975, whenever the movie came out. But she used to belong to some book club, and occasionally she would order books that would be of interest to me, and then she would give them to me if I wanted them. So I do remember that she got this book, and I immediately read this. So I read this when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I think, and I remember liking it. Look, it has David Hartman from Good Morning America and Mako. He's in it. Or maybe Mako, depending how you pronounce it. I don't know. I don't know if we've ever said that guy's name out loud. But he's been in a lot of good movies. He was in that movie with Lee Marvin. No, that was Toshiro Mifune. Okay, I remember liking this. I read it when I was a kid. Next book. Let's make sure we get it set up nicely here. This next book I've never read before, and it's in terrible condition, but I do remember where it came from. It's called Look Away, Look Away by Leslie Turner White, an exciting and richly colorful novel of the carpetbagger period. So this is going to be about the American South, I suppose. Look away, Dixieland. I wish I was in Dixie, away, away. I haven't read this before. It was a gift from my Aunt Clarice. My Aunt Clarice, the illustration of this cover is great. It's really beat up, unfortunately. Look. My Aunt Clarice used to live next door, and as she got older, I used to spend a little more time with her. She was really fun. She never had any children. She had been married to my Uncle Frank, who passed away some years earlier in the 70s, I guess. Huntington Library of California. I'm going to read this. This looks interesting to me. I'm interested in this. But she gave me things occasionally when I would go over there and hang out with her towards the end when she was probably in her 80s, I guess. I've got a couple things that belonged to her that she passed on to me that she gave me. But I would help her out with stuff. And we would watch bowling together, football. She smoked and I smoked, so we smoked cigarettes together. And we just talked, you know. She was a really nice person, really cool lady. I don't know anything about this book. Emperor of the Air Stories. I picked this up at a Goodwill or a thrift store of some sort because it looked interesting to me. Ethan Kanan. I don't know anything about it. Sorry about that. These are beautifully crafted stories, says Hilma Wolitzer. A wonderfully alive and sensitive young writer. A storyteller whose characters and plots are original, compelling, and linger in the mind. I enjoy reading, and I like writing too, and I'd like to write more, and like to learn to write more better. And so, because I like to read and write, and I'm trying to always learn to write more better, that's why I accumulate books of certain sort. Because it's a research of some sort, maybe, I guess. This is a book from, well, it is. It's all, you get it. Okay, so this is a book from my mother's collection. Her favorite writer was this woman, Pearl S. Buck. She wrote a real famous novel called The Good Earth that was made into a movie. And I believe that movie, um, I think most of these stories take place in China. I think Pearl S. Buck was a Chinese missionary of a sort. I haven't read the book. It's terrible that she had an entire collection of this, like an entire shelf of these, the whole collection of this series right here. And I remember she gave me this because, well, look at the title, The Mother. But she gave me this, but she loved Pearl Buck, and that was her favorite. Look. That's my mother's name and my mother's writing from 1935. Carmen Reis, or Carmen Reese, as we pronounced it as Americans. She's a first generation American. My grandfather came from Portugal, from the Azores Islands. So let's see. I think she was born in 1922. So she was 13? Yes, she was 13. So I know she was born in 1922, not think. So she was born in 1922, my mother, so she was 13 when she signed her name in here in this book. And she started reading, or she was a fan of Pearl Buck. I don't know how much more of it she had read before that. I imagine that the first book she read would have been The Good Earth, but I'm not sure. But we have this, and I haven't read it, and I need to read it. Okay, moving right along. I believe this is another book from my mother's collection. It's John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. Very nice edition. Pretty sure this is hers. Now, I've read this book before a couple times, but I've never read this particular edition that belonged to her. Look, this is a little later. She's a little older. She has access to a typewriter, or she has a typewriter at this point. She has library plates that she's putting in all of her books. It says $1 up here. That's strange. So cool. This is a great book if you haven't read it. If you haven't read John Steinbeck, I don't know if this is the best place to start, but this is a great book. Moving right along, this is an Elie Wiesel book called A Beggar in Jerusalem. Haven't read this. This is going to be about Jerusalem and about being Jewish. I've read something else by Elie Wiesel. I think it's called Light or something like that. What was that? The author of numerous novels, including well, those aren't any of the ones that I read. I feel like he wrote something that was really important. I thought it was called Light. It was a book about a concentration camp. Read that years ago, but I haven't read this yet. But it's in my collection, and I intend to read it. Here's a book in my collection that I also haven't read yet. It's a national bestseller. It's called An Unquiet Mind, a memoir of moods and madness by K. Redfield Jamison. This came from my old work, with great, what would you call it, recommendation by a coworker. She told me that I should read this, but I still haven't read it. I have lots of books from my old jobs, a lot of them being healthcare type jobs, and depending on the different field that I was working in at the time, and healthcare is reflected in the books in the collection. And I haven't got to this one yet, but everybody used to tell me you need to read Unquiet Mind, Dave. And I just haven't read it yet. So there it is. But now I'm retired, so I don't need to read it for work anymore. I managed to make it through without having to read that book. Okay, this looks interesting. I remember getting this at a thrift store. It's called Fast Food Nation. I don't think I've read this front to back, but I remember thumbing through this and reading a portion of it, and maybe like right after I got it home from the thrift store, because look, see the dark side of the All-American Meal. It's a new afterword. So yeah, I was interested in this. This is a neat looking book, and I need to get back to it and actually read the entire thing and find out about the history and everything. This is everything about fast food, right? What does it say? Fast food has hastened the mauling of our landscape, widening the chasm between rich and poor, fueled an epidemic of obesity and propelled American cultural imperialism abroad. Ooh, that's a lengthy list of charges, but Eric Schlosser makes them stick with an artful mix of first-rate reportage, wry wit, and careful reasoning. Well, this isn't at all what I thought it was. I thought this was going to tell us about the history of different fast food restaurants, but this sounds like it's some sort of communist manifesto to make me, some sort of hibbity-jibbity to make me not trust fast food, which I don't feel too good about that. This next book was a gift. I believe it came from Kevin at Gotham City Comics. This is a writer that lives in his area there in Arizona. And I think that this Ray Torres III wrote this book. It's a cold-blooded terror 1,000 feet below Comet, the Ice Monster. I haven't read it yet. But this is a self-published writing. It's a novel that this guy wrote. It's here on the stack. So if you're watching Ray Torres III, I'll get to your book eventually. This is The Life of Pi, or just Life of Pi. Now, this was a big bestseller type book about this kid and this tiger on a boat. I didn't read all of this. I think I read this at work. First, this was recommended by many of my coworkers. People were reading this at work. I picked it up. I started reading it. I don't believe I made it all the way through. About halfway through reading this book, I see the movie, and then it kind of took everything out of it. I just lost interest. Okay, this is called The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Brilliant and hugely ambitious. It's kind of a book that can be life-changing. I have not read this yet. It also came highly recommended. Don't know anything about it. They probably made a movie about it as well. I was intrigued by this because of the title. I don't know if this is actually about a book thief, but my personal history of my life of crime, some of the crimes that I committed, very few. I don't have I'm never been formally charged for anything as an adult, but as a minor, I committed a couple crimes as a minor. And as a minor, one of the crimes that I committed with some regularity and was never charged for was stealing books. So I would steal, I don't have many, but I got a handful of books that I know where they came from, and I don't want to say because I'm not proud of it. But yeah, I was a book thief. It's just an odd thing, right? Now, I was always ashamed of stealing a paperback book from a bookstore back when I was like 14 years old when this was happening. And I remember one time I was in a VA group and people were talking. It was something in this group at the VA, and it was a bunch of guys sitting in a circle and everything. I haven't read this Tom Robbins book yet, but I like the cover and the title. So we're in this VA group and people are like divulging things or something. I don't remember what, but I'm like something that you've done that you're ashamed of or not proud of or something like that. And so I pulled up the book thief story and I told a little bit more of it, and I told them about how I would take the bus to this bookstore and in this town where I used to live, and it was a wealthy area, and it was just a weird thing. It's not like I was poor, and it was and I told the whole story, and people laughed and thought it was interesting and funny that my criminal history involved the things that I stole were books. I didn't steal anything. I didn't steal the books to sell them to make money for drugs or anything. I stole the books to read them. So I guess I thought of that way before. If that book thief book is about that, I've been doing that for decades. Or I did it when I was 14. I never did it as an adult. Wasn't doing it I never was a book thief as an adult, just as a kid. All right, let's see. It really like 14 or not even 15. It was probably when I was about 13 or 14. It was a phase. Let's see. Come on. Let's just do a couple more because I'll get to that last. What's this? New American Short Stories. It's an interesting cover. I haven't read this yet. This is something that I picked up at a library book sale or a thrift store. That's the other thing I forgot to throw in there is I used to buy a lot of books at library book sales, when they would have everything stacked out at the front for $1 a piece, and I would pick up a lot of stuff that way. As an adult, this was once I grew out of my book thieving stage. This is a nice book. I think this came from my mother. This Jungle Books by Kipling, Volume 1. It's neat. Let's look inside and see if it comes from the collection of Carmen Reese. It does. So that she chose a very elegant and understated and classic book plate. It's nice. Maybe she didn't have much choice. I'm not sure. Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling. This is the last book we'll look at. This is a book that I read also as a kid. Probably I was about 14 or 15 when I read this. And this also was a gift from my mother. It came from her collection. This is Summer of 42 by Herman Rocher, I guess is how you say that name. Never pronounced it out loud. I don't see anything in here with her plate or name. It isn't, but I do know that she gave me this. So I read this when I was a kid, and this is a book about a kid, written from a kid's perspective, about summer on the beach in 1942. And it's a story of adolescence and childhood and adulthood and romance. Highly recommend this book. I think this is him, Hermie. So the main character in the book, I believe his name was Hermie. I read this a couple times, and I've seen the movie a couple times too. It's great, both book and movie. But I think this is, this is kind of, I would love to write something like Summer of 42. Yeah. It's kind of what I want to do. I want to be my own Hermie in a way, I guess. I guess that's maybe what all of us want to do. Your life is a story, and it's like a movie. Sometimes there's interesting and good parts, or at least you might think that they are. And if you're a narcissist like me, there's a lot of things that might have happened that you think might make good parts in a story or a movie. So that's what I do. That's what I write about. That's what I've written about so far, sometimes. But then I also just write junk too. Well, we looked at some books, and let's look at me. Hey, what's up? So we'll step back so you can see this is where we were. So I'm using these milk crates from my friend's deli that he gave me as a bookshelf until I get more bookshelves and furniture. So that's what we've been doing. See, we're looking at, this is mostly magazines. There's some books. There's a bunch of action figures, a whole collection of 1960s and 70s Marx plastic action figures, and then a couple new guys down here, But up here, I stacked all these books, and all this stuff is up here. So we just kind of looked at just a few over here. There's tons more books. If you liked looking at the books, maybe we'll look at more of them. Well, here's some of the other ones that are coming up. Look, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. You guys read that book yet? 666 by Jay Anson. Right underneath Classic Christianity by Bob George. Do you guys remember Bob George? Oh, wow. I'm sure he's still around. I hope. It's been so many years. Well, this is a great book. You guys should pick this up. Classic Christianity. Life's Too Short to Miss the Real Thing by Bob George. All right. And then in contrast to that, boom, then we have some original artwork. It's some sort of a compilation, or not compilation, a collaboration. It's a collab in a way between Gratu Orloff and the talented YouTube artist John Goris. And down here you have the Feeling Good Handbook. This is something about depression that my psychologist gave me about 10 years ago, and I only read a small amount of it, but he said I need to read that book. I haven't got to it yet. But underneath that is Citizen Soldiers by Stephen Ambrose, The 39 Steps, and Karma, the Mechanism, Lolita, more Bob George, Growing in Grace, The Essential Teachings of the Holiness of the Dalai Lama, The Boys from Brazil, Dragon Riders of Pern. Gosh, it's just quite a variation, variety. Illustrated, these are some of the good stuff that I really like. So I've read this a bunch of times as a kid. I love this Kurt Vonnegut book, Slapstick. You should read this. I haven't read all of Studs Terkel working, but what I've read is really good and interesting. This is Whispers Under the Wharf. This is like ghost stories about the Monterey Fisherman's Wharf. Read that when I was a kid. This is Spanish for conversation. Hola. Mujeres and muchachos. Hasta luego.